The president of the Serbian region of Bosnia-Herzegovina is facing a year in prison. Milorad Dodik has repeatedly called for the Serbian-run region to join with the neighboring nation of Serbia, which obviously would split up Bosnia-Herzegovina. Last week, a state court there found Dodik guilty of ignoring the country's ultimate authority, the International High Representative. Dodik called the verdict nonsense and launched a fresh attack on Bosnia's national institutions, including the court that sentenced him. Guy Delaunay, with our partners at Deutsche Welle, reports from the Balkans.
1
year in prison and a 6-year ban on holding elected office. That's the penalty facing Milorad Dodik after his conviction at the court of Bosnia and Herzegovina. But the president of the country's majority Serb region seemed unfazed by the verdict as he addressed a rally in Republika Srpska's de facto capital, Banja Luka.
There is no reason to worry. I'm used to handling even tougher things, so I will handle this as well. What matters to me is that you are here and that you support me. That will always be important to me.
But this wasn't a case of a defeated politician taking solace from supporters. Instead, Mr. Dodik gave every impression of welcoming the guilty verdict. The court convicted him of ignoring the rulings of Bosnia's ultimate authority, International High Representative Christian Schmidt. Mr. Dodik has refused to recognise Mr. Schmidt's legitimacy, and he's been pushing for Republika Srpska's withdrawal from Bosnia's national institutions. Now, it seems that fight is going to intensify.
They messed up badly with what they did in Sarajevo. They are totally naive. I have to tell you that we have been waiting for this as a reason for political action. That is a reaction. Today, you no longer have the Bosnia and Herzegovina that you imagined.
What Mr. Dodik proposes, in essence, is to roll the country back to 1995. That's when the Dayton Peace Agreement ended Bosnia's ruinous conflict. It split the country on ethnic grounds into two so-called entities with weak national institutions. It was never supposed to stay that way, and over the years, centralised institutions have developed, including armed forces and the judiciary. High Representative Christian Schmidt has made it clear that neither he nor Bosnia's international supporters will allow that to be rolled back.
The international community remains vigilant. The Dayton Order and state institutions remain protected and have to be respected. Bosnia and Herzegovina is not negotiable.
In fact, Mr. Dodik has already triggered efforts to withdraw Republika Srpska from Bosnia's national institutions. He's even ordered prosecutors to investigate officials from the court which convicted him. But there's a school of thought that these bold moves mask weakness. Mr. Dodik has held positions of power since 1998, but he's never delivered on his promises of prosperity, and he's now subject to US and UK sanctions for corruption and endangering Bosnia's integrity.
People in the Republika Srpska are deeply, deeply disillusioned, in particular with the economic situation.
Toby Fogel is the co-founder of the Democratization Policy Council think tank.
Dodik is a besieged leader. He will find it very difficult to maintain power. He's running out of cash. There's widespread disillusionment with his rule. So I would think that he has a very troubled career ahead of him, even if this verdict isn't upheld on appeal or isn't actually implemented.
None of this will be much comfort to the long-suffering people of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Tens of thousands of them leave every year because they can't see a future in a country run by ethno-nationalists like Mr. Dodik. And despite his court conviction, he's not going anywhere for the moment.
Guy Delaunay reporting there from the Balkans. He's with our partners at DW Deutsche Welle.
From PRX.
The leader of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, says the group is ready to accept a ceasefire with Turkey. He is currently in a Turkish prison. We know that in the past, ceasefire talks between the Turkish government and the PKK have broken down. But if this current plan stays on track, it could signal the end of a 40-year insurgency that's played out across Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. The world's Duri Baskarin visited a Kurdish neighborhood in Istanbul to hear more about what the legacy of this conflict means for Turks.
I'm in a neighborhood called Tarlabaşı. Laundry hangs from lines strung up across the street. Walking around, you smell the coal fires that some families use for heating. During the height of the PKK insurgency in the 90s, millions of Kurdish people were displaced from their homes in Turkey's southeast. Faisal Topmacı was one of them.
Sen bugün benim babama bunu yaptın, sen yarın bana ne yapmaz?
Through a translator, Topmacı says in the early 90s, his uncle was killed by pro-government paramilitary forces.
Then they dragged him
Through the village, beaten and bloody. They later killed him. Everyone here has memories like this, Topmacı says.
Çünkü buraya gelenler hepsi göçten dolayı geldi.
Relatives killed in broad daylight, villages burned to the ground by paramilitary groups and the Turkish army. Topmacı says his cousin, a medical student with a bright future, joined the PKK after his father was murdered. 7 of his friends went with him. An estimated 40,000 people have been killed in the past 40 years of the PKK's insurgency. It's one of the longest-running conflicts in the world, with the PKK carrying out attacks on Turkish soil as recently as last fall.
Ben burada kendi şahımda ben ev tutmaya gittim. Evi tuttum, anlaştık.
Today in Tarlabaşı, Topmacı and his family run a kebab shop. He struggled when he first arrived in Istanbul. Many landlords refused to rent to Kurdish families. But he established himself, raised his kids, speaking both Kurdish and Turkish at home. He has a daughter in law school.
Çocuklarımız okula gidiyor, üniversiteye gidiyor, askere gidiyor.
We want to be part of this country. Like, for example, we are sending our children to the school, we are sending our children to the army. So somehow we want to be part of the system, actually.
To him, a peace deal between Turkey and the PKK is welcome, but he doubts its success. He points to ceasefires that broke down in 1993 and 2015.
Bu mesela bunun gibi kaç...
This is not the first attempt regarding resolution.
I hope it happens and I hope no one dies, Topmacı added later. But there are people on both sides who do not want this to happen. Last week, the imprisoned leader of the PKK, Abdullah Öcalan, called for his followers to lay down their arms and dissolve. Over the weekend, the PKK announced the ceasefire would begin immediately, but called for Öcalan to be freed so that he could oversee the process. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has not spoken at length about how his government plans to respond, but he alluded to the decades-long insurgency in a speech while breaking a Ramadan fast with the families of fallen Turkish soldiers.
Türkiye sınırları içinde ve dışında
in terms of fighting terrorism within and outside its borders, Turkey is the strongest, most capable, and resilient country in the world, Erdogan said. But he added a warning. If promises are not kept, or the process is stalled, or the PKK reorganizes under another name, we will continue our ongoing operations if necessary to eliminate the last terrorist, Erdogan said, without leaving a single stone unturned or a single head on a pair of shoulders. Rhetoric like this has, understandably, left Kurds uneasy that the ceasefire will hold.
It's a necessary step, but I think we're just kind of waiting to see what happens next.
Greg Waters is an analyst for the Middle East Institute and Counter-Extremism Project. At this point, he says, the last PKK fighters are based in the mountains of northern Iraq and Syria. Their ranks are dwindling. Some have resorted to kidnapping teenagers and forcing them to fight.
There's maybe a widespread base of people who are sympathetic to the cause, but the idea that they can easily recruit new people who would join the fight, I think, has really been degraded over the years. They see it as a lost cause. It's clear that they're losing ground.
For more than 40 years, the PKK has waged an insurgency against the Turkish government, fighting for Kurdish autonomy in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Another big question with this current ceasefire is what happens with Kurdish militias in Syria. A coalition there called the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, helped the U.S. fight off ISIS, and now they're the de facto government of Syria's northeast. Waters says Kurdish leaders there want to separate their movement with the PKK, but they've been stalled by internal disagreements between Syria-focused and Turkey-focused leadership.
This needs to be a Syria-first movement for ensuring Kurdish rights for Syrian Kurds.
Waters says a peace deal with the Turkish government will allow these Syrian Kurdish militias to have serious talks with the new central government in Damascus. The militias control the country's limited oil resources, but the area remains much poorer than in the rest of Syria. Turkish businesses will likely pay a big part of the country's reconstruction.
Everyone in Syria has always said, or at least understood, that Syria works as a united country because of all of the regions support each other, but isolated, it just can't function.
Until the ceasefire is agreed upon and implemented, this is all just words and hope. For The World, I'm Dari Buskarin, Istanbul.
From PRX.
The U.S. is no longer sharing intelligence with Ukraine. This means cutting off vital information about Russia's intentions and military movements as Ukraine defends itself from Russian attacks. Earlier this week, President Trump also halted military aid to Ukraine. Both are signs of how he has transformed America's relationship with close allies. Comments from top Trump administration officials suggest these decisions could be temporary and that they're part of broader negotiations between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky over a possible peace deal with Russia.
From PRX.
The U.S. and Israel are saying no to a reconstruction plan for the Gaza Strip. It was presented by Egypt on Monday, and it came out of an Arab League summit in Cairo. The Arab proposal lays out a framework for rebuilding the devastated Palestinian territory without displacing the civilian population. The Trump administration, along with the Israeli government under Benjamin Netanyahu, say they will not support it. A U.S. national security spokesperson today said that President Trump stands by his vision to rebuild Gaza free from Hamas. Fawaz Gergis is a professor of international relations at the London School of Economics.
The plan itself is designed as an alternative plan to Donald Trump's foolish and monstrous idea of displacing 2.4 million Palestinians of Gaza. While Donald Trump wants the Palestinian population out of Gaza, the Arab plan wants to keep the Palestinians on their land and helps reconstruct Gaza while the population remains there. So the plan is very thick on the various phases of the reconstruction process in terms of first phase, second phase, third phase, and also in terms of costs and in terms of basically relief for the population. Of course, it lacks any kind of enforcement mechanism. It lacks any kind of strategic vision.
So most of Gaza lies in ruins, and it's apparently going to take many years to rebuild the territory. Though the plan envisions completion by 2030, you say there's also no strategic kind of vision here. Fundamentally, though, who would finance Gaza reconstruction under the Arab plan?
Well, the Arab plan envisions that the wealthy Arab states, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Qatar, will play a major role in helping to finance this ambitious reconstruction plan. But the collective Arab plan also calls on the international community, particularly the European Union and other states, to make a major contribution. And the European Union has made it very clear they are happy and willing to do so. I think the reason why Donald Trump and the Israeli government basically rejected the Arab plan, because the reality is they want to depopulate Gaza. They want to really force the Palestinians' population out. I mean, the Arab collective plan starts from the premise that any displacement of 2.4 million Palestinians could be catastrophic not only for the Palestinian cause, but catastrophic for regional stability and security. It could really mean forever war between Israel and its neighbors for many years to come.
Who would actually monitor the reconstruction? And what does the Arab League say about who would govern Gaza?
I mean, I think the plan is not really very specific about what authority will basically be in charge in Gaza. It does not even mention Hamas. It talks about an administrative governance, Palestinian governance run by technocrats, helping of course, to bring about the Palestinian Authority, PA, into Gaza. But the reality is this is a very complicated and very controversial. It's a minefield. So the Arab collective plan really focused mainly on the reconstruction process, on the physical and social process, and it did not really lay out the security requirements, the mechanisms that are required to help the Palestinians establish permanent security in the Strip.
So I see some reports that the U.S. administration is now negotiating directly with Hamas. This has not happened before. What do you think that means for the ceasefire and return of hostages in the near term?
I think we should not confuse a tactical, basically, meeting between an American official who is responsible about the hostages, the release of American and Israeli hostages, with the strategic goal of both the Netanyahu coalition and Donald Trump. The reality is both the United States and Israel not only want Hamas out, both bureaucratically, politically, and militarily, they really want to have a free hand in the sense of really having complete security control, over the Gaza Strip.
As you look ahead, Fawaz, how much common ground are you seeing between the Arab states, the U.S., and Israel when it comes to Gaza's future?
I don't think there is much common ground at all. I think the divide is very huge. I think one thing is very clear. Any kind of displacement of the Palestinian population from Gaza would be seen by Egypt and Jordan and other Arab states as an existential threat. This really would have catastrophic consequences for America and Israel on the one hand, and basically their allies, Egypt and Jordan, that have already made peace with Israel. My fear that while you and I were talking about the plan for the reconstruction of Gaza, the ceasefire is unraveling in Gaza. Israel is unwilling to go to stage 2 of the ceasefire, unwilling to really turn the temporary ceasefire into a permanent ceasefire. In fact, we might see the resumption of Israel's war in Gaza in the next few days and next few weeks, unless a political miracle takes place soon.
Fawaz Gerges is a professor of international relations at the London School of Economics and Political Science. He joined us from London.
From PRX.